Throughout the election in 2020, we were continually barraged by an unending prattle of candidates who said that they were there to help the little guy, that they were there to help the small business, that they were interested in Main Street, not Wall Street, that they were going to do whatever it takes to help you and have a better life. Then the pandemic came. Perhaps you, like many other people, lost a job, took a pay cut, took a huge pay cut, lost family members, or suffered in some other way. We were fortunate that in this particular circumstance that there were companies that some of whom rose anew or who gained prominence, who allowed us to both communicate with people who were now distant in space and in time, as well as to procure the necessities and some of the luxuries with which we have become accustomed to living our lives. That in many ways, these companies were able to bring things to our doors and people still went to work. The interesting thing is, if you look at which companies did the best, during the pandemic, there were at least 4 different types of delivery trucks in the neighborhood right outside here that included companies, and not to endorse any of them, like FedEx, UPS, DHL, and Amazon. Even the U.S. Postal Service was involved in delivering packages and moving things from place to place. In fact, I myself use the Postal Service quite a bit, perhaps probably more than I have ever used the Postal Service in my life, because they allow me to do things online and because they have a different pay scale than the other alternatives, and since I don't have access to Amazon's pricing scheme like you do. However, if you look at the bottom lines and the increase for many of those companies, there are some who did much, much better than others. Perhaps this could be because of other diversification in their portfolio and their either horizontal or vertical integration of the supply chain management that makes their businesses profitable. But there's another thing that should be considered. That is the role of elected officials in deciding winners and losers. I'm a government employee, and my government employer decided that they were going to continue to pay us. I continued to do work, although I don't work anywhere near as much to the same degree or to the same level of fidelity that was once required. However, the governor of the state of Nevada prided himself on the fact that in all of this tumult and economic duress that he only had to fire 50 state employees, even though it was shown that around 50% of state employees were classified as non-essential. These are individuals who sat in their houses, watched TV, ate bonbons, and did absolutely nothing while they collected an almost full paycheck. I took a pay cut. I'm actually only getting it now because they didn't actually institute it until December. I think the governor was hoping that Washington would bail them out and he wouldn't have to cut any of our pay. The reason why this would be important to our governor is because state employees cast votes in elections. They actually bend over backwards to make sure that we have an opportunity to go and vote, as if our vote matters anymore if they're manipulating the machines anyway, but that's another story for another time. And so it would be very poor judgment on his part to cut the pay of a huge group on whom he is probably dependent for his future political aspirations. The other problem, though, is a bigger one beyond state employees, beyond actual jobs, and that is in terms of what policies politicians decide and how they affect the way businesses actually run. Many businesses were not allowed to meet because they couldn't afford to pay for the safety provisions, or because their places of business were not such to where they could actually fit whatever the arbitrary and specious demands were of government officials on how to contract their business. In fact, it even gets worse than that. Some businesses in California were not allowed to even continue to convene their business once they met the criteria, but civic things, especially public protests, were allowed to continue despite the fact that none of these same provisions were enforced on individuals gathering without an economic interest. And so what you find then is that in companies and individuals who are unable to simply spin on a dime and turn around in an instant and make their businesses competitive either went out of business completely or were unable to compete with their competitors. It has been said that it is almost impossible to find a Chinese restaurant that's ever gone out of business, but there are 3 within 2 miles of my house that closed down because they, for whatever reason, they were unable to get people to come in and frequent them. Two of these are family businesses, by the way. You know, that so-called little guy that Democrats always say they want to help out. But I don't really think that the Chinese Lao restaurant on Nellis Boulevard is of any interest to the politicians. I have the sneaking suspicion they don't vote for those kind of people. But the bigger problem here is because those companies are organized in a certain way, and I'm talking about FedEx, UPS, DHL, and Amazon, is that those companies, many of the workers that we see are actually completely isolated, and they probably had the capital available or were able to get special provisions from the government in order to stay open. And this could go back all the way to when they were given special benefits and privileges in order to establish the business in the first place. There is this gigantor Amazon complex in North Las Vegas out by the Motor Speedway that we have here that I guarantee you was built with special tax incentives from the state, county, and city in order to attract the business there and to allow them to get established. Now, there are a lot of companies that put warehouses in Nevada because of Nevada's tax structure, and they have gigantic facilities for many businesses stretched across the state. But to have one inside the city, close to an important venue and right next to the freeway on your way out of town, that's pretty damn rare. Most of them are out on the outskirts, and some of them are outside of town completely. Walmart's distribution center, for example, is almost as far east of the Mustang Ranch as the Mustang Ranch is east of Reno. That's a brothel, in case you don't know. And I know that because I worked there. So what you have here is a cultivated effort between some businesses and some elected officials that gives them an advantage. All the while, the officials will talk as if they care about you. They don't. Let's look at some of the information. As this article posted in the Washington Post shows, during the pandemic shutdown, billionaires got richer. And in fact, certain particular individuals whose politics and products were actually helped by the political and economic decisions made during the pandemic were helped even greater than anyone else. Despite the fact that politicians, elected officials, and civil servants continue to claim that they are out there trying to help every man and lift Main Street, it seems that even when they are trying to help us, unquote, they actually help the richer the most. Even the Washington Post admits in this title here, the pandemic might actually shatter the myth of benevolent billionaires. It also might shatter the myth that billionaires are the problem and that governments are actually fighting to change the disparate advantages afforded to billionaires and millionaires and extend them to people at sidewalk level. So while you have been losing your money, your jobs, your time, your prospects, the richest people in the world have been getting even richer. In a time when everyone is stuck and everyone is suffering, these individuals have done nothing to be, benevolent or philanthropic. I mean, look at these increases here of how much their net worth went up in a year. And these are in billions of dollars. Were your increases that great? Now, this is not to foment any kind of envy or anything. This is to illustrate that there's a disconnect between what people like Senator Warren say and what they actually do. Now that we've looked at the articles available, it's very easy to see that there are certain businesses that have advantages in spite of a disadvantageous situation. However, if you look at these individuals, these are individuals who were able to not only survive, but they multiplied their expanse during the pandemic. If you are forced to sit in your house and you can't go to a mom and pop store, but you can buy on Amazon, who is going to get your business? If you're forced to sit in your house and you can't get together with individuals, and your only communication options are to go on social media, they're going to barrage you with advertisements on social media because you can hardly watch a YouTube video that's monetized for 3 minutes without having to watch an ad. And some of them are 30, 45, or 100 minutes long for an ad. You have got to be kidding me. But that's how they've now taken advantage of the situation in order to profit, because the government made these decisions, and these companies have now been able to capitalize on those decisions and monetize it to their benefit. Are any of these businesses philanthropically reaching out to you? If they do, it is a statistically insignificant percentage of their income. Even Lowe's, and this is not to dig on any individual company, says it's going to do 100 projects in 100 communities. Well, that's all well and good. How many communities do we have, and is that going to actually make a difference? In those areas, it will. It's like throwing an individual starfish back in. You can't save them all, and I think that's what Lowe's is doing here. I can't help everyone, but I'm going to help some people and then give something back. This is how most corporations appear to be less evil, is that they will reach out in some small way, but as a percentage of their income, as a percentage of their largesse, as a percentage of their profitability and prosperity, it's essentially zero. In fact, as a percentage of income, the more you have, the lower the percentage that you give. And the more money that you have, the less likely you are to give, and the more picky you are about those to whom you give. And so this beneficence towards people is largely illusionary, but the profits are real. And this is the problem here, because almost everything you see is an illusion. Up on the top shelf back there, you can see on the top shelf here, I have all of William Shakespeare's plays. And having read them, and I've seen almost all of them, I have learned that most of what you see is the parliamentary puppet theater. We have businesses who tell us we care about you. We have politicians who tell us that we care about you. But in this pandemic, what we've really learned is that it's only individuals who care about other individuals. That none of these large entities give a flying pinwheel about what's going on in your life. They only care about what is going on in theirs. So if you look around your community, you have to ask yourself these questions. Are any of these politicians or corporations coming into my neighborhood and doing a damn thing, other than the things I'm paying them for, like to deliver packages? Are the politicians even answering when I write to them and communicate with them? Do you get any feedback back from a company? And is the feedback anything other than pablum and canned phraseology that they send back to anyone who writes in to make an inquiry? And then think about how many of your neighbors have you met? With how many of them have you spent time? With how many of them have you made an effort to reach out? What have you done? Because I'll bet you bottom dollar that no matter how many dollars you have, that on an average, you are all more philanthropic than any politician or corporation ever will be. Now, this is not to say that in terms of absolute value, in terms of absolute dollar value, that they're doing less than you. It's because in their sphere of influence, these are global companies with multi-billions of dollars that can get to anyone and help anyone at any time, and they only help their pet projects. These are politicians who think nothing of spending trillions of dollars at any time, but they mostly care about their pet projects. I love that Democrats mocked, it's been a long time ago now, almost 30 years ago, Dick Cheney, the Secretary of Defense, for saying the following, and he did say this, I remember hearing it: $1 billion here, $1 billion there, and pretty soon it adds up to real money, while they spend trillions, which is 1,000 billion. As if billion is somehow bad, but trillion is somehow good. As if bigger is always better. But as a percentage value, of your time, your talents, your ability, your species, you are giving far more by going next door and checking on your neighbor who's had surgery, or the 80-year-old up the way whose garbage cans are blown into the street in traffic, and you go help him, than any of these corporations will ever do for anyone unless there's an agenda behind it. Because there is this huge lie that we are being sold, and that is that those who have power care about those who do not, because this is exceptionally rare. You all know that power corrupts, and absolute power corrupts absolutely. And there is almost no person who has ever attained a position of power or wealth who has done anything other than become corrupt, evil, and decadent, even if it's only in his own life. If you think about the individuals who own Amazon, I don't even know who owns FedEx or UPS, but even the people who run Walmart, about your politicians, generally speaking, you all know that they're not good people. But we pay them because they have an idea that is beneficial to us. They do not pay us because the only benefit we have to them is the money that they can bilk out of us. It is a lie that people who do not know you can care about you. It is a lie that people, because they are in a position of power, can be trusted and that they care about you. Most of those people are their own favorite constituent and beneficiary. They are the only ones whose opinion always matters and whose well-being is in their mind when they make decisions. If corporations shouldn't be able to donate because they're not people, corporations should not be given credit for philanthropy because corporations are not people. In the end, all good things that are lasting and actually transformative in your life are done to you by other people. Those people may belong to a political party. Those people may belong to a particular business or educational institution or a demographic. But in the end, it is not the whole institution that does that. It is individuals in that institution who choose to take those actions. While there are organizations that predominantly contain individuals of a certain disposition, no organization is 100% pure ideologically or in terms of their virtues, values, and morals. And when they do act, it's not the organization that acts, it's certain individuals. When you are benefited, it's because of some other person came and decided to do something of benefit to you. And when you are slighted, it is because some individual decided to abuse their agency in order to take away yours, to use their prosperity to limit yours. And any politician, any corporation that gets up and says they care, you can pretty much guarantee that they're lying for this reason. People who are good people don't have to advertise that they're good people. Other people will advertise their virtues to you, and they won't have to say a thing. If you're having to convince other people that you're virtuous, of good report, and praiseworthy, it's probably a lie. Do your own homework. Trust but verify. I want you to be skeptical, but I want you to be happy. And believing other people without evidence to back it up and ignoring the evidence that's available is setting you up for disappointment, rejection, and dejection. And that's not going to make this world better, especially with a pandemic on our minds and on our hearts. If you've been affected by this, my heart goes out to you. I'm grateful that I kept my job and that I was able to pick up extra work in order to make up the shortfall from the furlough that they gave us. And I'm looking forward to returning back to work, hopefully for at least fall semester, if not summer. If you've lost your job, if you've lost your health, if you've lost loved ones, if you've lost your financial resources, go find a person who cares about you and who's in a position to make a difference, and give the person the credit. The organization does not deserve it. The organization doesn't even care if you exist. Godspeed. Good luck.